Hi guys, welcome back to Tea with Tea. Like so many of us, I'd always complain about how much I hate my job, but I never imagined myself actually leaving. And I'd hope that even if I did leave, I have a plan before doing it. Honestly, I was going to go MIA until I figured all of this out, but I remember that the entire reason I started this channel was to show that we're all facing very similar struggles, that we're all a little bit lost at the end of the day. So here it goes, I guess. So today's video is going to be a bit different in that instead of answering your anonymous submissions, I'm actually going to be sharing my own personal struggle. I want to first of all start by saying that I've never been an impulsive person, and this definitely was not an impulsive decision. In fact, my entire life up until now has been based on premeditation, deliberation, and lots of planning, which is what made this decision especially difficult for me. For a very long time, I felt that quitting my job meant that I had to reject everything I knew and had built. It's funny, I recently rewatched the College to Corporate video I made last year, and I was just laughing at myself because a lot of the things I covered are actually the reasons I ended up leaving my job. I did pretty well all around, so I was never too particular about what subject to pursue in my higher education. Honestly, I was just looking for the least annoying way to make money. And to me, the corporate route was the simplest and quickest path to financial stability and structure, which was my priority. So from the moment I started applying to universities when I was 16, everything I did, from campus jobs to internships to extracurricular activities, were all in pursuit of the career that I am now giving up. Which begs the question, what happens when you're finally getting everything you've worked for, only to realize that's not what you really want? And not just that, but that you're not even sure what it is you really want. I eventually found myself in a constant state of introspection when I began to ask, what even is my personal definition of success? That was when I realized that in all my early career planning, I never even considered pursuing the things that I was genuinely passionate about. And I'd quickly written them off as too risky, insecure, unpredictable. And with that mindset, I'd already jumped the gun straight into the rat race. Speaking specifically on the American college to corporate pipeline, the pressure is insane. I remember so many of my peers striving for corporate internships literally as early as our first summer of uni. Like, what had we even learned at that point? Don't get me wrong, I think it's a privilege and a great opportunity to get early work experience, because trying things out is one of the best ways to figure out what you want. But I also believe that the pressures that come with this norm end up pushing many of us right into hustle culture before we get to properly enjoy the luxury of just being a student. A time where I believe that discovering yourself should be your primary responsibility. And honestly, I think this plays a big role in why many of us are now feeling lost doing what we thought, or at least were made to think we wanted. As I've expressed in other videos, I think it's very difficult to try to achieve our innate need for self-actualization without subjecting ourselves to some sort of unhappiness. It can't be healthy to consistently spend the majority of your time using your body, your mind, so much of yourself, and pouring it all into a career you feel extremely disconnected from. Even if you're not necessarily working your dream job, you should at least feel the freedom to express your authenticity in one way or another. I believe that when we go too long without expressing our natural gifts, talents, and overall authenticity, essentially the things that make you you, we inevitably begin to lose ourselves and end up clinging to occasional pleasures as distractions from that unhappiness. I personally knew I was losing myself when I became a very anxious person, something I'd never ever experienced in my life. I became antisocial. I'd come up with any excuse to not see people, or I'd end up leaving like 30 minutes in when I did. I started experiencing brain fog, forgetting everything. My eyes started twitching. I became indecisive about virtually everything. I randomly burst out in tears multiple times a day. I felt so small, so dull. I knew I was not happy. I don't know if this makes sense, but I literally need to be happy to function. So regardless of the situation, I physically cannot stay like upset for long. And because of that, many times I was able to convince myself that everything was okay. I'll just be like, yep, it was just a phase. I'm fine. And I genuinely would believe that I was fine. But it took having one honest conversation with a friend for me to finally let everything out, and I realized that no matter how much time had passed, this overwhelming feeling was always there, and that every time I thought things were getting bearable or better, I had just successfully distracted myself again. And in all of this, I would get so upset at myself. I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that this was based on a desk job. A desk job at a very reputable corporation that also happened to be funding my comfortable lifestyle. And that many people I knew were working so hard to be a part of. I felt guilty, ungrateful, weak. But at the same time, I knew that the problem was much larger than it being a desk job. It was that I was still trying so hard to bend and box myself to conform to an ideology that my life had to follow a specific path in order for me to be successful and happy. But there are so many paths to success. I had simply chosen one that wasn't for me. Many of us look at people like Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and feel led to use their stories as a blueprint to our own success. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with being inspired by the lives of others, but I also think that something that people tend to forget and should remember is that no one has to incentivize Elon Musk to work late nights or postpone or cancel exciting holidays. To him, making these sacrifices just mean getting another step closer to his own dream, his own idea of success, something that actually gives him joy. Warren Buffett himself said that he tap dances to work. The man is literally an unretired 94-year-old billionaire. He could be doing any and everything else with his time, but there's nothing else he'd rather be doing. This is what brings him fulfillment. And yes, I know many people have learned to be content with committing themselves to things that they have absolutely no passion for. But personally, I want to know that I seize every possible opportunity I have to experiment with the things that I actually do care about. People go on about how Gen Z is lazy and soft, but I feel globalization has just made the world so much smaller, to the point where we refuse to believe that everyone is just doomed to living a miserable life dedicated to doing things that they absolutely hate. I know for a fact that there will always be annoying jobs to do out there. I also know that this is the youngest I'll ever be, probably the least responsibilities and most energy I'll ever have. Like, obviously I don't want to be broke and unemployed, but if I got to choose any time in my life to risk everything, it will be now. Even if, God forbid, I end up regretting this decision, let it be that I actually try to prioritize my happiness and passions in some way. I feel like I'd be doing myself a huge disservice otherwise. But I have to admit that part of me found a lot of comfort in what it did for my ego. Like, I wanted my parents to continue to be able to go on about how proud they were of all my achievements and all I was doing for myself. And I started to think, what would they think of me now? What would their friends think of me now? What would my friends think of me now? Sometimes we create these imaginary critics and scenarios that only exist in our minds so that we can hide behind them in fear. Guys, let's be real. No one is thinking about you that much. It's not in anyone else's place to decide how great your life is, especially when you don't even feel great about it. But with all of that being said, the reality is that I am now unemployed with a new lease and student loans in one of the most expensive cities in the world. So am I scared? Of course I am. Confused? Of course I am. Especially considering the fact that moving back in with my parents would mean relocating to Nigeria, which I'm honestly not trying to think about right now. But guys, it sometimes gets to a point like, why should I be waking up every day and crying about going to my job? And guys, I'm 23. Like, my life is just beginning. I'm a woman of faith and I genuinely do have so much confidence. This is the time for me to try, mess up, make up, do whatever I need to do and just figure myself out. I'm trying to give myself that grace. So for now, I plan on just taking everything a step at a time. Also, a very important factor, I've always been a natural saver. I actually just don't spend money on things unless I really want it or on family. So I do have savings. That of course is very important and something that you need to consider. Obviously it's not like crazy to where like I'm gonna just quit and vibe out, but at least I do have enough to just be able to chill for a bit while I figure myself out, so that's good. Anyways, my short-term goal is getting back to the person that I lost. So while I figure things out professionally, I'm just going to be trying simple things that I used to enjoy before corporate America. And I joined TikTok. I write my YouTube videos before recording, so they tend to be a bit more formal. So I'll be using that to keep you guys posted and answer any follow-up questions. Just from the little conversations I've had, I know that many of us are dealing with this particular issue. So I want you to know that you are not alone in this. We are genuinely all figuring this out. I hope that knowing that we're all trying to cope with these same feelings makes you feel less alone and more seen. I encourage anyone else that may have experience dealing with similar situations to give suggestions that they think may help us all cope. Thanks for watching and especially for your vulnerability. I'll see you on Sunday. Bye!